Okay, some questions to ponder. Butter or canola? Why is the carnivore diet so popular right now? How much should we fear processed foods? And are there any benefits to drinking raw milk? It can all feel like a bit much to sift through when you're on social media. So today we have a lineup of experts to wade through the posts. To start, we're going to hear from the president of the Canadian Medical Association. Dr. Joss Reimer has just launched an online campaign to help you spot wellness influencers who maybe don't have all the credentials that they need to be giving the advice they are. Then we're opening the phone lines for you to put questions to two Saskatchewan registered dietitians. I'm going to start with a question. How much protein do I really need to eat? You can call 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, to start things off, we have Dr. Joss Reimer. Dr. Reimer, welcome to Blue Sky.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to have this discussion.
So I was scrolling social media, going down a bit of a rabbit hole, but then a post with you popped up, and it was so fitting that you were taking on some of the things that were on my mind in my feed. So tell us a bit about how you're engaging with social media and the campaign that you're part of.
Yeah, it's an exciting thing to talk about because we've all seen many posts telling us that this is what you need to eat, or you need to do this type of exercise, or you absolutely must avoid this toxic ingredient. And it can feel really overwhelming and really scary. And so what we're trying to do at the Canadian Medical Association is not necessarily answer all of those questions, but give people a bit of a blueprint on how to process all this information that's coming at us, because of a lot of it is misinformation. So the campaign that we're working on is to help people understand, how do you watch for those red flags? How do you know who to trust? How do you process the information that's coming at you in a way that's going to make sure that you're coming through it with the best possible answers for you? And so a few of the examples that we've started so far is we did a post about what are some red flags. And we talked about, when people talk about things in absolutes, this is the supplement that's going to save your life or add 10 years to your life, or you should always avoid this toxic ingredient. These are the types of emotional grabs that people will use to bring you in, but that don't necessarily reflect the science. Because as much as I wish it weren't so, often the truth is a lot more boring and a lot more complicated. So that's just one example. When you see those big, flashy, absolute emotional messages, that's one of the things we want people to just take a step back and double think about whether or not that really is true, and go and find another source of information to help you figure it out.
Why would someone on social media be saying these sorts of things anyway? Like, why would someone come out with an absolute? Like, what's the motivation behind the posts?
Yeah, there's a couple different things, the reasons that people are doing this. The first is that sometimes they're trying to sell you something, and that's another red flag. If someone's selling you something, that doesn't mean that what they're selling you isn't good. It doesn't mean that what they're saying isn't true, but it does mean you should be extra skeptical, because now there's a different motivation. They're trying to get you to buy whatever they're selling. So there's a motivation to say whatever they need to say to get you to buy. But even if they're not selling you a specific product, they're trying to sell you on them. And so those catchy headlines, the catchy messages, they're more likely to get those clicks, to get views, and to get more attention on that person. And so it's much easier to get attention when you say something controversial, when you say something flashy or absolute, than it is to go out and say, one of the questions you asked is butter better for you or canola oil? Well, probably canola oil most of the time, but it's not like butter is this evil substance that you should avoid. And so the truth is often complicated, and you need to think about, well, how are you using it? How much are you using? What are the alternatives available to you? And that's a less sexy conversation, and it's going to get a lot less clicks and views than if I come out and say, like, seed oils are toxic. They're not, but that can get a lot of clicks.
Give me some examples of what you're seeing online. I've been sharing the last couple of days with folks what I see in my what the algorithm is feeding me. So I'm 43 years old. I like to run, getting a lot of perimenopausal posts. And so protein, electrolytes, like I'm seeing all of that. And then when you start to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, like then I start to see even more extreme things. Like my feed for the most part isn't too bad, but if you go looking for posts, you can sure find some pretty extreme viewpoints. What are you seeing online?
when it's hard to even keep up, because once you start to debunk one thing, they've found something else. So the seed oils one is something that's been really popular to talk about how terrible those are for you recently. And really there's no evidence to support that seed oils are bad for you. In fact, they can be a source of healthy fats when used in a healthy way. But that's one of the things. There was a recent thing about sunscreen being toxic and bad for you. Well, that one's definitely concerning, because one thing we know for sure is that radiation from the sun is a major cause of skin cancer, and skin cancer is the most common cause of cancer in the world. So these are the types of things that we get concerned when we see. There's other things where, people talk about how it seems like you can just never get enough protein. And so if anything, some people are probably having too much protein because they're responding to these things. The carnivore diet or the keto diet or any of the extreme diets, they grab you in and seem to produce a solution. And as soon as that solution is a bit too good to be true, it probably is. What we want instead is for people to have diets that meet their taste needs, their cultural needs, their nutritional needs. And a flashy diet that is popular right now is probably not going to meet all of those needs for anybody.
What happens when some of the messaging comes from not just influencers, but people in positions of power? I want to share with you a clip of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So he will likely be taking on the health portfolio under U.S. President Donald Trump. I know he's said a lot of things about vaccines. We could spend time talking about that today, but we're focused on nutrition and wellness. And, he's been attached to that slogan, "Make Americans Healthy Again." And he's taking aim at processed foods. So let's listen to this clip of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speaking on Fox News.
So about 70% of our diet now is ultra-processed food because it's the cheapest food. It's highly subsidized. It's corn, soy, and wheat, which means processed wheat, processed flour, processed sugar, and seed oils. And then we have on our food in this country, we have 1,000 ingredients that are illegal in Europe and other developed countries. And one of the things that happened at the meeting yesterday was they would show, for example, a box of Fruit Loops from Canada or from Europe, and it has a completely different group of ingredients actually colored with vegetable oils, which are safe. Ours are colored with chemical oils, which are very, very dangerous. They grow tumors, they're causing cancer, they're directly linked to ADHD in kids, and the food companies know this, but it's cheaper for them, and they get brighter colors and Fruit Loops, but it's literally poisoning our kids.
So I know there was a lot in just that 1 minute clip, but Dr. Reimer, what stands out to you in some of that messaging that we're hearing there?
This is the kind of misinformation that can be really tricky to identify, because there were elements of truth in that message. And so when you start with something where there is some evidence that ultra processed foods are not the best option for us to fill our diet with. And when you start with something that has some truth to it, but then you add in a lot of layers and some absolutes, when he starts going into how the dyes are causing cancer and they're causing ADHD, that's where we don't have evidence to support that kind of extreme statements. And even with the ultra processed food, we still know that for many people, that can still be a healthy choice for them, depending on what their income is, depending on what other options they have available to them. Just telling someone to completely avoid one type of food is not helpful, but instead to say, you should be trying to have a diet that's more fulsome, that's got lots of whole foods in it. We want people to have more fiber. Something we know about North Americans is that very few of us get a good enough fiber intake, and ultra processed foods tend to have very low fiber. And so the messaging in the truth is more complex, but it's really easy to have those scare tactics where you say, oh, look at these Fruit Loops and the dye that they have in it, it's going to cause cancer for your kids. That's a catchy headline. And that's the kind of stuff that we're trying really hard to have people think again. When you hear something like that, think again. When he said there's 1,000 ingredients in American food that are illegal in Europe, I have no idea if that's true, but it doesn't sound true. And so that's, again, an opportunity to step back and look for sources to say, is that true? Are there 1,000 ingredients in the US that are not legal in Europe? And if so, why? And what does that mean? Because truthfully, I don't know if that's an accurate statement or not. But we really want to make sure that people are hearing that what's healthy in your diet is not going to be a quick fix, and it needs to be tailored to you. I'm so glad that you have two dietitians who are going to be answering questions, because I think they're going to give very similar advice about how that, you need to be making these individual decisions, and getting advice from someone like a dietitian who has far more expertise in nutrition than I as a doctor do is really great. One of the things that we actually briefly talked about before we went on the air was how a lot of influencers will call themselves things like nutritionists. And so looking at someone's background to understand what is their expertise, should you trust the information that they're bringing to the table? Knowing what their background is really helpful, and knowing what the different terms mean. Nutritionist is not a very meaningful term, whereas dietitian is a meaningful term. That you have to be registered, you have to be licensed. It means you got a specific set of training. But when you call yourself a nutritionist, we don't really know what that means. And so we really want to start to educate Canadians on understanding what expertise someone brings forward. And if they're speaking outside of their own expertise, it doesn't mean what they're saying isn't true, but it does mean you should be extra skeptical.
Any other red flags that you want to share with folks? I mean, we're all going to be scrolling. We're probably multitasking right now, scrolling and listening. And so what else should people be watching for?
Yeah, you should always look to see whether or not there's any sources that they're bringing forward if they're making strong claims. So if you're saying something like the dyes in Fruit Loops cause cancer, then there should be a source to back that up. There should be some evidence bringing forward proof that this is something concerning. If it's really emotional or sensational, those are things. And even if it's emotional in a way that's positive, sometimes you can see these very emotional and validating posts. And what they can do is really reinforce your own biases, because we all have biases. When we go into social media, we're all influenced by our personal beliefs, our backgrounds. And so even when it's something that's super validating, if that's a strong response you're getting, that should also cause you to question a little bit and take a step back to say, well, why am I feeling so emotionally tied to this post? I already mentioned if they're selling something. I mentioned what their background is. The other thing is to just think about who benefits from this post, who's funding this, what's the background, where is it coming from, and is it consistent with what I'm seeing in reliable sources? So if there's some sort of misinformation, you might be able to find it on PoliticaFacts or Snopes. I don't even know how to pronounce it. But there's websites out there that's their job, is to do this type of looking into misinformation. And so you might actually be able to go and look at some of these reliable sites to see if someone has already debunked the information that you're seeing.
How big is this challenge that you're facing as an organization, the Canadian Medical Association? I mean, anybody who works in public health, to try to counter some of these messages? Like, how convinced are you that any kind of online campaign you do will get through to people and beat out some of the influencers that maybe don't have evidence in the claims they're making?
It's a big battle. And like I said, the truth is often less sexy and less attention grabbing, and that makes it a big uphill battle. So it's really incumbent upon everybody who has health expertise to be working our very best to try to debunk misinformation, or even something we call pre-bunking misinformation, which means putting out accurate information before those myths start happening, because we need Canadians to know where they can go for reliable information. We're really lucky that physicians are still, even despite everything that happened in COVID and all the misinformation there, physicians are still the most trusted profession in the world. And so at the Canadian Medical Association, we take that seriously, and we want to make sure that we're contributing to these positive discussions and being a reliable source of health information for Canadians, because it's so hard to navigate. And when you're just on social media, it can be really tricky to know. And so we want to be able to have these places people can go to double check things, because if we can try to fight this, that's the best we can possibly do. And there's good evidence that pre-bunking and debunking do work, but we all need to be rowing in the same direction.
This has been such a good setup to the next part of our conversation. Dr. Reimer, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to listen.
That is Dr. Joss Reimer, who is president of the Canadian Medical Association. Some really good information there. And I know that we're all on the same World Wide Web, but our algorithms are totally different. So even after hearing all that from Dr. Reimer, I still have questions, right? Because for me, like I said, I'm in my 40s, I might be in that perimenopausal stage, and I get a lot of posts targeting those things.
Hey ladies, have you been struggling to lose belly fat? Guess what? You've ruined your metabolism by not eating enough. You're not getting enough protein, okay? You're gonna need to take grams of protein and multiply it by the number of stars in the sky, and that's how much protein you're gonna need in a day in order to lose weight. But you're also gonna need to stay in a caloric deficit in order to lose weight, idiot. But you also have to live your life, okay? Memories, not macros. No more cardio, okay? You need to start lifting weights, heavy weights, at least 3 to 4 times a week. And you also need to get 10,000 steps a day, which sounds a lot like cardio, but we don't call it that anymore. Okay, get with the times. So get your 10,000 steps every day, but don't exercise every day. You need to rest. Otherwise, your cortisol levels are going to be through the roof. Your muscle mass is deteriorating at the speed of light, and you're turning into a Teletubby, and everybody knows it because you're doing too many cardio HIIT classes and your cortisol is high, and you need to be putting on muscle mass so you can hold at least 75% of your body weight for like a minute and a half or so if you want to be able to live into your 90s. It's not that stressful. Perimenopause is going to cause sleep interruptions, but you also need to make sure to get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Otherwise, your cortisol levels are going to kill you. Okay, it's science. It's hormones and science. Comment science for my 6-week plan to get totally snatched. Follow for more tips.
Okay, so I find that hilarious. That is a spoof on many of the posts that I see on social media. Let's get to the questions now that people have, because for the remainder of the show, we're going to put some really specific questions to 2 registered dietitians from here in Saskatchewan. Brooke Bullock is a registered dietitian with Food to Fit in Saskatoon. She's here with me in studio. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
And then we've got Ken Mullock, who is a registered dietitian in Regina, who works with individuals at risk for developing chronic disease. Ken, hello.
Hello, thanks for having me too.
Yeah, so good to have both of you. So, I mean, I don't even know where to start. And so many people are emailing already. But I am curious what each of you are seeing in your feeds. And of course, we just heard a lot from Dr. Reimer. But Ken, I want to start with you. Like, give me a sense of the nutrition information that's flowing on social media when it comes to your own feed.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm seeing in a lot of the population that I work with, a lot of this confusion around nutrition. They come to me and think, like I'm seeing all these different mixed messages. I have no idea what to do. Or people are feeling like failures because they see online, I should be eating, avoiding seed oils, eating more protein, but eating less of this, more of this. And people feel like, I can't do this. I can't do anything. I'm such a failure. When really that's not what nutrition is about. But yeah, seeing a lot of, you mentioned hydration earlier, a lot of talk about hydration, dehydration, and should we be adding electrolytes to our drinks? The protein is a huge one right now. Everybody thinking protein. Everything needs to have protein. We're seeing, protein gummies and protein donuts and protein Diet Coke. And that's
protein
kind of
Diet Coke? Really?
Yeah. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. And then the carnivore diets and trend from plant-based eating more towards animal-based eating now. That's becoming the newest trend. So those are some of the big ones that I'm seeing in my feed and with the population that I serve.
Okay, we'll get into more of the answers after our news break at 12:30. But Brooke, what are you seeing in your feed?
Yeah, very similar. I second everything that Ken said, but also I work with a population that deals with polycystic ovary syndrome, as well as the menopause transition. Mm-hmm. So, and being 43 as well, Leisha, I think we are targeted. So I'm seeing a lot around cortisol, around this idea of hormone balancing, as though you can like fine tune it like a soundboard. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, a lot of what you should and shouldn't do. There's a lot of hard black and white thinking, and similar to Ken, a lot of people come in feeling very lost, very confused. But also, I think that what we can do, and in addition to what Joss had said, is encouraging people to really tap into their intuition, because I think intuitively people are knowing that it sounds a little too good, or at least the people I'm seeing, they come in with a ton of skepticism and they really want a bit of clarification, which can be tricky because there's science, which isn't perfect, and then there's lived experience, and, human lives are complex.
Yeah. If you have questions today for our 2 Saskatchewan registered dietitians, give us a call, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. And just a note, we're not going to be hearing advice that's specific to you. We're going to be talking in more general terms. What does the evidence say? So, keep that in mind when you're asking your questions, that they can't be really specific for exactly what it is you might need, but at least we can get the conversation started. So again, 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. I like this question we got over email from Lori, who writes, my question is about rice. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, I was led to believe that white rice is a healthy starch. Maybe not the way I ate it with a lot of melted butter, but that's not my question. My question is brown rice that much healthier than white rice? And how bad is white rice in reality? Thank you. If you can finally put this question to bed for me. Brooke, do you want to take that question? You might get that one a lot.
Yeah, I think this was one of my topics on one of my reels recently. I was eating some rice, and certainly I think diet culture has kind of led us down this all white foods is quote unquote bad. I think one of the things I want to point out is that this is an important cultural food for millions of people worldwide. So I think a lot of the rhetoric behind it is this idea of its glycemic index. So that is the rate at which the rice will raise your blood sugars. And there's a lot of nuance with the glycemic index, but also most people don't eat white rice by itself. And certainly if they needed to, there's probably some level of food insecurity. So when you add fat, fiber from vegetables, and protein, say from meat, which many cultures do, you suddenly don't have such a blood sugar spike. And so the difference between white rice and brown rice is actually nutritionally not huge. There's not a lot more protein in brown rice or fiber, which we often do see in whole grains. Whole grains often have higher levels of protein, fiber, and B vitamins, but the difference is pretty minimal in white to brown rice. So a lot of the time I might be, with my own clients, looking at what they can add and just balancing those meals if there are blood sugar concerns. But for the most part, no, white rice is not one of those sort of bad categories.
It's all my kids will eat.
Yeah. And, again, respecting cultural foods and the role that it plays in that. And we want to remember that including your cultural foods as part of your meals is also a health-promoting behavior.
Ken, anything you want to add on that topic before we move on to another?
I was just going to add, I think this lends to the idea that I really like, that variety is so important. Diversity is so important when you're eating foods. So, maybe most days of the week you're going to eat white rice, but maybe, here and there you have brown rice too, or maybe you're going to make both and mix them and have a good mix. It doesn't have to be completely black or white, and that's the same as we'll see in a lot of nutrition concepts. It's not always so black or white. It's not always so specific what's good and bad. There's room in our diets, and that's the beautiful thing about being human, is we can get nutrition from a lot of different foods. So we can eat different things, try different things, have variety. Nothing's going to be detrimental. Nothing's going to make or break you, and we can have fun eating different things.
Okay, I like that. Let's go to our next topic, and this is the one that I really want your answer on this one. First, let's take a listen to another clip from social media.
I have been drinking this smoothie almost every morning for the last 3 months. It's got almost 60 grams of protein, 10 grams of fiber, and it helps me feel absolutely amazing.
The recipe is so simple. We're starting off with frozen spinach, then frozen raspberries, frozen cherries, a bunch of Greek yogurt, water. I like to blend that until smooth, then add my protein powder so it doesn't get too frothy. It is absolute perfection.
So how much protein does a person need? And obviously there are a lot of different factors to take into consideration. What I was saying earlier is what I need is maybe different than a caller in Ross Stern. But in general, this emphasis on protein, like how much does a person need, Brooke?
You know, and adults' protein is their needs are going to vary depending on, their chronic disease, injury, physical activity level. And we do have sort of an acceptable macronutrient distribution range, which is wide, like a total percentage based on caloric intake. It ranges from 10 to 35%. So the recommended dietary allowance right now is thought to not be sufficient enough to maintain muscle mass and strength as people age. Additionally, Dietitians of Canada position on nutrition and athletic performance states that there's good rationale for recommending protein intakes well above the RDA to maximize metabolic adaptation to training. So that said, the current RDA for protein is only set at 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So, for example, a person weighing 84 kilos or 185 pounds requires at least 67 grams of protein. So, one thing to consider is this makes a great starting point for most adults as a minimum amount of protein required, but it may not be a person's ideal amount of protein. Right. We do have a lot of wiggle room, but I'm also hearing ridiculous recommendations on social media by non-dietitians as high as 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Almost no one requires this much. Perhaps an elite athlete who's working with a dietitian, but like ridiculous amounts of protein.
Ken, I'm curious because Brooke did say something that as we age, you might need more. And we got an email. I've got it here from Tim, who writes, I've been reading those articles that say you need a gram of protein per kilogram of body weight daily. And they say that for seniors, this could go up to 1.1 or even 1.2 grams per kilogram daily because it's harder to maintain muscle mass. That's what you were saying, Brooke. I'm a senior who's trying to relieve back problems, so I've increased my protein intake to 1 gram per kilogram body weight daily while also doing a workout program, weightlifting and walking along with that. Because the articles say that all the protein in the world won't do you any good unless you're exercising in order to make use of it, I was wondering what your guests have to say about that. I also get about 30 grams of my daily protein intake from various protein powders. Perhaps your guest could also comment on the usefulness of those. And then he has one more question, wondering if those powdered greens can be a substitute for real vegetables. So there's a few things in there, Ken, and I'm going to kind of leave it to you to pick up on what you want. Because again, we don't know everything about Tim, but he raises things I think other people are wondering too. So go ahead, Ken.
I think first of all, I want to mention that protein is we have more needs for protein in our body than just muscles. There's a lot of cellular functions, just overall, body management that we need protein for, down to the more like chemical level. So it's not just muscles. But also we need to think about the limitations of protein too. It's not like it's a drug or a medicine. It's not going to cure you of things. It's not going to magically fix all of the, ailments and issues that you're struggling with. We need to think about your health and wellness as a whole. And so, protein is not a magic fix that we think it is. There's a lot of micronutrients that we call them, like vitamins and minerals that play a big role in our well-being, in how our bodies age and deal with injury and, overall well-being.
I think this is a good... go ahead. I was going to go to a caller, but why don't you finish your thought?
I was just going to say that I think the greens powder is a whole other discussion.
Okay, we'll come back to powders and whether those are good or bad. And I guess it's not always just good or bad, but what we can, think about when we are choosing some of these things. We do have a caller on the line. Angelica from Regina joins us right now. Angelica, welcome to Blue Sky. Hi, what's your question?
My question is about menopausal women. We all know that when you get to that age, there isn't anything you can do to try to lose weight. All the other tricks in the bag don't work. Eating vegetables, cutting out bread, exercising, drinking more, on, and we still gain weight. What is that? How do we fix it? How do we overcome that unavoidable target?
It's such a good question.
Especially since we're no longer protected from heart disease by estrogen, because there isn't any.
Love that you called, Angelica. Let's go to Brooke for some thoughts.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I would say it's coming up a lot in my practice. And so one of the things I want to do is provide a little bit of information around the role of estrogen. So as people go through menopause or the menopause transition, which can be a 10-year transition, estrogen is starting to deplete. Now, it's not like just a nice gradual decline. It's going to ping pong, but estrogen plays a big role in metabolism. So one of the reasons why it's harder to lose weight is because metabolism does slow, and estrogen also plays a role in cholesterol metabolism. So that is one of the other reasons why cholesterol can go up. It is not necessarily that your cholesterol is rising because you're gaining weight. It's that your estrogen is going down. And so the other thing is that estrogen plays a role in bone mineralization. And so that is why also people going through menopause are at higher risk for osteopenia and osteoporosis. And so estrogen plays a massive role. And so it's not that, I think part of the rhetoric is weight gain is a failure as you're going through menopause, which is not true. And there can be a protective mechanism to it. But I think a lot of people are feeling very frustrated with this weight gain because of the perpetual rhetoric that, oh, you should be losing weight as you go through menopause. And as we age, weight loss is always going to come back to muscle loss. And so again, going back to that protein, yes, and this caller is right. You increase the hydration, you increase vegetables, you increase protein. It might not shift weight. For some, part of the reason too is as estrogen drops, we start to replace, and as we age, oftentimes our activity goes down. So we start to replace muscle with fat as well. So the more active you can maintain and the more muscle you can maintain as you go through perimenopause, the more likely that you will support that metabolism. However, weight gain in menopause is really not the worst thing that can happen. There's very little evidence that BMI or weight gain causes the symptoms that people experience, like hot flushes. It's pretty mixed.
What about belly fat? Because people often come back to that, like I'm aging and it's all in my belly, and then that comes back to cortisol. I mean, I don't even know some of the messaging that I'm hearing, but belly fat comes up a lot.
Yeah, and we know that deep visceral belly fat, so that's the fat that we grow that can increase around the organs, can increase triglyceride levels and increase the risk of heart disease. But belly fat on the surface, like underneath the skin, is different. And, in clinic, I mean, in a clinical trial, they might be able to measure that. But for the vast majority of people, we don't have access to that measurement. So not all belly fat gain is, again, really negative. And I think the other thing to consider is this idea of cortisol belly. I'm definitely hearing a lot about that.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
There is some evidence that cortisol levels are higher among people with more belly fat, but there's also lots of people in higher BMIs that don't have elevated cortisol. Cortisol is going to fluctuate throughout your day. It is higher in the morning. I'm also hearing a lot of diet culture messaging around like how to lower cortisol and lose that cortisol belly, as though like cortisol causes belly fat. We don't have any evidence showing a cause and effect relationship there. But additionally, what's hilarious is as I was going through a deep dive of the literature, the food item that helps to lower, or nutrient that helps to lower cortisol, is carbohydrates, including sugar. Huh. So then there is this discussion around like, wow, and actually fairly high amounts of sugar help to lower cortisol. So then, health experts are like, well, I mean, at what point does the high sugar then start to negatively impact your health? So it's really unclear. We have no clear evidence when it comes to cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And so lots and lots and lots of unclear and I would say hot messaging around that, just because it's a buzzword.
Yeah, Ken, I'm wondering when people come to you with questions around these kinds of things, because I'm listening and I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I want to be healthy. I want to make the best choices for myself, for my family, like that window of perimenopause, like all of that, right? And so, and I scroll and I want to take the bits of information that will help me, and I want to leave behind the stuff that's harmful. So when someone comes to you, Ken, and says, okay, well, I don't want to gain weight as I get older, like what do you say?
I think we first need to think about, just overall, what does the eating pattern look like? And if there's room for improvement, such as, increasing fiber, fruits and vegetables, whole grains most of the time, quality sources of protein, good carbohydrates, that's the priority when it comes to nutrition and wellness and aging. If it so happens that, the effect of that is someone losing weight, and that's a goal of theirs, fantastic, and that's great that we're able to achieve that. But if we tackle nutrition straight on with the priority and the goal of weight loss, what are we really achieving there? Are we able to, achieve good nutrition if our goal is just to put you in a caloric deficit, restrict the amount of nutrients and quality nutrition you're getting, just to lose weight? But then we're going to be deficient in all of these other things that are important for healthy aging. So I think, first of all, we need to think about what does the overall eating pattern look like for someone before we start talking about weight.
Okay. I'm dying to know about electrolytes, so let's listen to another clip from social media.
Now, if you check out the Flav City electrolytes, it's got a boatload of hydrating minerals like calcium, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium. My salt is unrefined from the good old US of A, and I'm the only one on the market that uses real organic fruit, not natural flavors. Comment hydrate, and I'll send you a link to check it out. If you take some pickle or fermented sauerkraut brine and just splash a little bit in water, you just made a hydrating elixir, because there's a good amount of good sodium in here, along with a little bit of magnesium and potassium. And if you get fermented sauerkraut, you just made yourself a probiotic electrolyte elixir. Next time you're filling up a bottle of water for the road, pinch in a little bit of unrefined salt. Stuff like this has up to 90 trace minerals, many of which are hydrating. But the kind of salt matters, because if you get table salt, there's no additional minerals. It's been bleached and processed, and the only thing in here is sodium. This is what you want.
So, is that what I want? Ken?
What I'm seeing a lot right now is people seem to think the only way that they can be hydrated now is if there's sodium or any other, added minerals in their waters. Now, really, we need to remember that water itself is hydrating for the majority of people. Drinking water will hydrate you. Also, eating food. 20% of the food, 20% of the water that we get in a day comes from our food, fruits and vegetables. Anything, that has a little bit of water just in the food matrix, that we get that water from it. Completely dehydrated if we're having water with our meals, maybe in between meals, other beverages in the day, and eating food, chances are we're getting enough water intake. There's even, the myth out there that coffee is dehydrating you. That's not true. If you're drinking a cup of coffee, it has water in it, and it's not going to make you lose any more water than you're taking in. So we're not all walking around dehydrated like this myth likes to make us think. And we do want to think about sodium in our diet. This idea that we need to add all of these sources of sodium into our drinks, that contributes to our daily intake of sodium, and that's something that we want to be mindful of. We don't want to go above the recommendation, because then we start looking at risks with heart disease, cardiovascular events, and things like that.
Brooke, what are your thoughts on electrolytes?
Yeah, vast majority of people don't require extras unless, there's profuse vomiting, diarrhea, or sweat. And so when I was doing a lot more in sport, certainly, any athlete will look at adding electrolytes in certain situations because it is the number one electrolyte lost in sweat. What I tell my clients is do a quick urine check. And I find that this is easy without overthinking how many cups of water am I taking in? But if it's, running a little dark, quite deep yellow, it's definitely time to have a little drink. And I do this all the time too. And if it's running pretty pale, I think you're probably okay. But I can't help but wonder if excessive hydration intake is encouraged as a way to sort of help mute the body's hunger cues, as in eat less and hydrate and lose weight. But ultimately, you can't trick your hunger. And I know I was raised if you're hungry, drink something first. Yeah. I definitely had that messaging. And you can maybe fill the belly temporarily, but you cannot trick your hunger. Your body knows the difference between hunger and thirst.
We'll move on to another topic. We've got a bit of tape from someone who got in touch. Let's take a listen.
Hey ladies, have you been struggling to lose belly fat?
Not that one. I think there's another one. Stand by. Here we go.
There's so many different views out there. However, I do follow one doctor in particular that has started this major conversation about menopause and all the symptoms around that. And she's an author as well. So I did read the book, Dr. Mary Claire Haver. Lots of people have heard of her. She does talk about belly fat and things that you can do to improve it, including diet or intermittent fasting. And I actually experienced these things because all of a sudden, despite my diet, despite no alcohol, despite good healthy eating, despite tons of going to the gym, doing weights, my pants were getting tight and I was very, very frustrated. So I decided to start intermittent fasting. And I did that at the end of June. And since then, I actually have lost 20 pounds. And my pants are fitting me again. In fact, they're loose and I feel so much better. I don't feel like I look that much different. It's all in the middle. The belly fat is gone, which is very odd, but it worked for me.
I like hearing that at the end, that it worked for me, because what works for one person, may or may not work for another, but it's interesting hearing people's stories. Intermittent fasting, I'm so curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. Brooke, do you want to start?
Sure. It can look like a variety of things. It can include alternate day fasting or twice per week fasting of lower calorie intake on those days. Most common that I see is time restricted eating of, eating within an 8-hour window and not eating within a 16-hour window. And ultimately, most people fast when they go to bed at night and they don't eat until, the next day. What I find most of the time is that people are essentially just skipping breakfast.
Which would create a calorie deficit.
Yes. And it
or
can...
Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah, it can bite people a little bit because what I find in practice is that the less that people eat in their waking hours, the more that they're going to make up for it later in the day. And, a lot of the time, it's especially if it's a person who's struggling with binge eating, earlier calories and fat, fiber, and protein earlier in the day is going to benefit them in many ways. And obviously, that's a complex topic with a lot more moving parts, but to oversimplify it. And, there is a systematic review and meta-analysis of random control trials done this year. And yeah, there can be health benefits like reduced cholesterol, triglycerides, insulin, and systolic blood pressure, as well as reduced fat mass and waist circumference. Most studies run about 4 to 12 weeks. The longest has been shown to run about 48 weeks. But ultimately, we really have no long-term data on any diet as to whether or not weight loss is kept off for life. And actually, the data that shows, at the 2-year and 5-year marker, the vast majority of people who get engaged in dieting or intentional weight loss gain it back and sometimes more by the 2 and 5-year mark. So, it really does beg the question, should we be recommending weight loss as a blanket statement? Intermittent fasting, in terms of health markers, it's great that it might have worked for this person and who knows what else was going on for them. But I would say it's not a gold standard. It's not a magic bullet. And there are other ways to also improve cholesterol, insulin, blood sugars, blood pressure, and so on.
Ken, what are your thoughts on intermittent? I don't know why I find that word so hard to say. Intermittent fasting.
Or we could just call it IF. That's usually what I shortened it as when I'm writing it down.
That's easier. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I thought I'd just speak, to kind of what I see in my practice. I see a good mix of people living and dealing with chronic diseases. And I don't see much difference between, the people who are really doing well with their blood sugar management and heart health, and the people who aren't. It's not to say that the people who intermittent fast are doing any better than others. It's quite a mix. It works for some people, and it doesn't work for others. But what I do notice is a lot of the people who come to me and say, I'm just so hungry at night and I just can't stop snacking. I should be going to bed, but I just want to stay up and grab things from the pantry. When I dive more deeper into, what they eat and their eating pattern, it usually comes down to this idea that they are thinking that intermittent fasting is the best for them. skipping breakfast, waiting till longer in the day to start eating at night, the brain is more active. It's telling them, feed me. We need to catch up on, we didn't start eating until later. We got to catch up on what we missed. So a lot of those people that struggle with that, evening snacking, high cravings, high hunger, is because they're trying this intermittent fasting approach. Yeah.
We're going to have to do another
show.
I
think,
okay.
I was just going to briefly say,
delay.
A lot of times if for the people who it does work for, sometimes it can get to a point where it's not sustainable anymore. They're like, you know what, I really am missing that evening snack, or I'm hungry later in the day. I want to do things and be able to, feel satisfied before I go out for the day. So we can actually achieve, the same like glycemic control, blood sugar control, weight management. If we just take what they would eat in that window, spread it out a little bit more, we can still achieve those same good objectives in the end.
I want to take this last minute to share some tape that I got from Sydney Wright, who's a registered dietitian in Saskatoon, also works with Food to Fit, because she has this great Instagram account. And the other day she posted about chemicals. Take a listen.
So if I were to read some of the ingredients, we could start with phenylalanine, oleic acid, 3-methyl-but, 1-ethanoate, 2-methyl-butyl-ethanoate. It's a tongue twister. I don't think I could pronounce some of the other ones. So the things that I was just listing, some of them were amino acids, some of them were natural flavor compounds, and they are all naturally occurring in a banana. A lot of people do have a fear of ingredients they can't pronounce, or chemicals or preservatives in our food. And I think a lot of it stems from just, again, not really knowing what it is or what they do. So I think a big part of my job is just sort of bridging that gap and explaining like the role of some of these chemicals, and explaining that everything we eat is made up of chemicals, and just taking some of that mystery and some of that fear out of the equation.
That's Sydney Wright, a registered dietitian in Saskatoon. We aren't going to get to all of the questions we got today, which is too bad, but that means we'll have to have both of you back. This was clearly a valuable conversation for folks, and I so appreciate the information that you shared. So, Brooke, thank you.
Oh, it was great to be here. Thank you.
Ken, thanks to you too.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
That's Ken Mullock, a registered dietitian, and Brooke Bullock, also a registered dietitian. Ken is based in Regina. Brooke is based in Saskatoon. I'm Leisha Gravinsky. You've been listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1, 94.1 FM in Saskatoon, 102.5 FM in Regina, and 540 on the AM dial right around the province.